Welcome back. Let's get into that market picture now. And we start off in the Far East, where Asian markets were mixed this morning. But investors do remain broadly upbeat after a strong U.S. jobs report that eased concerns about the world's top economy, while the pound managed to edge up at the start of another crucial week in the Brexit saga. Now, the gains built on last week's rally that was fueled by optimistic tones from China and the United States on those trade talks, with a top White House economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, saying that they had been very productive and moving the ball in the right direction. So it was an up and down day, however, in the Far East, as Tokyo's Nikkei slipped around 0.2% there, closing the day out at 21,761 points. The Hang Seng managed to gain around 0.5% there at 30,077, but a downward day for the Shanghai Composite, that going down 0.1% to 3,244 points. Let's head on over to the United States now, where those stocks also then rose on Friday, boosted by better than expected job growth in March, with eased concerns about an economic slowdown that may have periodically rolled financial markets over the past year. The Dow Jones Industrial picked up 40 points. That closed out the week at 26,424. The S&P 500 gained close on 0.5% to 2,892. And the Nasdaq Composite as well picked up 0.6%, closing out at 7,938. It's a bit of a subdued picture, however, on the emerging market front, and that seems to have done away with the rally that we saw last week. But it is slightly positive still on the South African front, with the oil share going up, but the likes of the industrials and the banking sector not faring as well as one would have hoped. And the rand, of course, coming down from that 5-week high as well. So certainly things are beginning to progress and moving in another direction perhaps for this week. Let's unpack those numbers and we'll get to chat to Maudi in just a bit. Well, that market picture itself has told a pretty interesting picture considering yesterday's rally and how the markets performed from last week. But coming into this week, a little more subdued, maybe still searching for more impetus and what exactly is going to move the market picture this time around. Let's have a chat now with Maudi Lindwana from Lehumo Capital. Maudi, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. But it's a slightly positive picture to start the week, yes, but not as upbeat as the whole of last week was. Perhaps markets still looking for some direction?
Yeah, good afternoon, Aurabile. And yeah, absolutely right. I mean, a bit of an uninspiring start to the new week. There are a number of things, of course, that are happening elsewhere in the world. We've got that European Council summit that will be taking place. And of course, we expect to hear from Theresa May, her submission that she wants to obviously extend that Brexit deadline. We'll have to wait and see what the European leaders have to say about that. And I think that's what the markets will be watching. And of course, there's a number of other things that are developing. US-China trade talks, as you indicated, there is some positivity coming through there. The reports, the unconfirmed reports, is that those talks are progressing very well. So I think the markets is on a wait and see kind of a mode, and to try and see those confirmation and the details of the trade talks, for example. If they come out and they announce some positive issues there, I think it will be very positive for the market. But for the time being, I think it's a bit of a wait and see kind of an approach.
Did the Bank of America Merrill Lynch last week, who came out with a statement saying that the S&P 500 is probably likely to top out when it comes to its rally in quarter two, how does that change things then for global markets? Does it really give that sense of negativity, hurting the S&P perhaps, and then filtering through into the rest of the emerging market space? Maudi, I'm not sure if you could hear me there. Just wondering if you had seen the Bank of America Merrill Lynch report, which just stated that the Q2 rally out of S&P 500 is likely to end now. And do you think that negativity filters through into the rest of the world?
Yeah, look, I think, Arabile, there are, those concerns, around whether or not the global GDP will continue to really power ahead. And, there has been a number of concerns. We've had from the likes of Donald Trump also raising those concerns, even going as far as saying the Fed should actually begin to cut the interest rate, something that is obviously unheard of, the president really dictating to the Federal Reserve what they should do. But I think this confirms that I think a number of people are concerned about the global GDP going forward. The job numbers were marginally higher than the expectation, but I think you look into other quarters of the economy globally, there are some weaknesses, and those weaknesses are really putting a lot of questions as to the sustainability of the global GDP going forward. But it's still early days to actually tell. I think there's still a number of things that could actually go positive for the global GDP. For example, if the trade talks are confirmed, the talks are concluded positively, I think that should be a boost to the global GDP. So it's still very early to really make a confirmed view around that issue. Yeah,
it's also very difficult to note, of course, if Brexit does happen positively, it's the question of who does it become positive for? Is it just for Britain, or is it really for Europe? And does it really affect the rest of the world? And just how much does it affect the rest of the world? You're quite right on that front. But I wanted to touch on that Donald Trump story with regards to the Fed. We have pretty much a similar issue here in South Africa with regards to the nationalization of the Federal Reserve. A decision that could be made there would certainly be very difficult in terms of moving the market on that front. And surely then somebody needs to explain to the President Donald Trump there that this is not how you do things.
No, this is certainly not how you do things. The Fed should be allowed to be independent of any government. They should be allowed to really perform their mandate away from the interference of the politicians. You do also make mention of the fact that here there seems to be a similar conversation. Look, it's here at home. It will only become a concern if the government begins to really interfere in terms of the constitution or the mandate of the Reserve Bank. Ownership does not necessarily change anything. We know a number of central banks in the world that are owned by the government, but the mandate remains what it needs to be guarded, and it needs to be independent away from the government. So we can't draw the conclusion and say this is what the ANC is looking to do. It's still early days, but if that is what they're looking to do, then that would be very dangerous for the economy, and that would be very negative for South Africa.
Yeah. Maudi, really appreciate your time as well this afternoon. Live for us at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange there. That's Maudi Lintwana there out at Lehumo Capital, of course, unpacking that market picture for us. But I just thought we should touch on perhaps a little bit more of that market picture as well out in Europe there. The FTSE 100 out in London going up a touch today, but really not as positive as one would have hoped thus far. So that picture itself is one that we'll continue to look out for. Look, market participants there are certainly not looking at just Brexit, but really just the strength of particularly that banking sector. It seems that a lot more fears and a few jitters have hung around there, but today it certainly had it higher. The DAX out looking slightly negative today, the CAC 40. I wanted to touch as well on the commodity picture. Now that oil price, the Brent crude price, has seemingly gone up to $70 a barrel, and that's become a key worry just across the board. That has raised itself to what is a 5-month high. So we'll continue to unpack exactly what's continuing to happen with that picture and just how much that will impact South Africa's markets and that petrol price, of course. For now, however, we'll take a short break. We'll be back with more news right after this.